Okay, let's get started. It's already, I guess it's 2 o'clock by Miami time. It's great to kick off this semester's lecture series with someone who is I would say a rock star in the making. One of the things when you're in my position, when you're working as an academic, you're dealing with the latest ideas, the latest technologies, and you're also looking out for the really talented stars that are appearing. When I was teaching at the Architectural Association, Neri Oxman and Akim Mengiz were still students there. And Behnaz, actually, when I first saw her, I thought, do you know Neri Oxman? You're a bit like her. And you all know Biana Boghossian. Behnaz is a very good friend of Biana's. They're both from Iran originally, and they both studied on the IMAC program at the cinema school in Los Angeles, the most famous cinema school, I would say, in the world. They've got 2 buildings there, one that's donated by George Lucas, and the other one's donated by
Steven Spielberg.
Steven Spielberg. One thing I'd say about Behnaz, there are 2 things I want to say about Behnaz. I won't talk too much about it. You probably noticed her name before. She's won a lot of prizes. She won a lot of international prizes. I think 2 years ago won the Cooper Hewitt Digital Design Award for the United States, having just become a US citizen. She's also worked for Adidas and a number of very famous companies, and so on and so on and so on. But there are 2 things I'd say about Behnaz is firstly, we've got these tools now, these digital tools, and we can all use them, but we need to sort of move through into a different sort of modality where we're using them in a critical way to make commentaries on the world, and so on and so on. It's not just a question of fetishizing the technology, it's how you use it and in what way. And Behnaz's work is really interesting because he uses computation in a critical way to make all these, as you'll see today, all these amazing sort of commentaries. The second thing is that she is from a country where she wasn't even allowed into the workshop in the past. You can't watch a soccer match in Iran if you're female. And she came across here and opened up and has become this incredible, I think, icon for any female student. Is a role model for any female student, especially if you come from outside the States. I won't say any more. Behnaz's got far more interesting things to say, but it's a great pleasure to be able to welcome Behnaz Farai to FIU here today. Welcome, Behnaz.
Thank you very much, Neil. Hello, everyone. It's a great, great honor to be here. And wow, this is a full house. So it's a great honor to be here. Let me just get us started. Nope, it's not doing good. It's okay, I can just play from here. So I want to share the work that I've been produced for the last 12 years. I work at the intersection of interactive, immersive art, fashion, architecture, and I'm really fascinated by ways that materials can become machines, and machines become materials. I'm interested in tactility, textures, and movement of materials, and to see how materials could be embedded with computational systems. So I call these machines emotive machines or emotive environments. These environments can foster a sense of empathy or a sense of connectedness, and they can recognize, sense, or detect our emotions. I've been exploring these in last, I would say, 12 years in a variety of scales. I've been producing these emotive environments through a series of scales ranging from the scale of the intimate scales of wearable and fashion all the way to architectural installations. I explore specifically how materials of the environments could be soft, interactive, reconfigurable in order to create new relationship between human body and the built environment. These materials many times are equipped with sensors, with AI, with various type of actuation systems. They can recognize human movements, gestures, spoken words, or even our emotional states. So I started building a robotic installation, for instance, this ceiling installation, which respond to the movement and activity of the people underneath the ceiling, was a sponsored project by a steelcase company. The idea of this was also creating a reciprocal relationship between the human bodily movement and the physical shape of the environments. But these ideas didn't stay just in the world of architecture. I was very interested to see how these ideas, how interactive technologies could be populated around the human body in order to influence human perception, ways of communication, or our social interactions. For instance, this neuromorphic helmet responds to the brain activity of the users. So as the wearer attention level goes higher, the helmet opens up, and as the attention level goes down, the helmet closes down and creates a cocoon around the head. The main inspiration in my work comes from nature, and this makes a lot of sense, especially in the context of Miami. I am absolutely fascinated by sea creatures. They're beautiful and mesmerizing, but also not only in terms of their forms and morphology, but also in terms of their intelligence in responding to both internal as well as external stimuli. So I'm really interested to create environments, materials, which can have similar intelligence in responding to both internal as well as external environments. 4 concerns that informs my design practice include new materials, sensory technologies, robotics, and lastly, critical design. And I hope to unpack some of these during my presentation. In my design research, I developed new materials using 3D printing, algorithmic design, and robotic fabrication, inspired by natural systems such as feather, hair, and a scale system, like fish scale systems, which varies their properties from soft to hard, from very dense to very porous. I'm really interested to see how we can develop materials which varies its properties across the surface. These materials could be soft and flexible when it needs to be. They could be active instead of passive in response to their surrounding environment. Using actuation systems such as a smart material like shape memory alloy or pneumatic systems, I'm also interested to see how we can bring these materials alive. But I'm also interested to see how these materials could sense their surrounding environment. I've been working with various types of sensory technologies, including biometric sensors such as brain-computer interface, EEG technology, or various facial or gaze tracking systems, and explore how these systems could recognize, analyze, and detect our physiological responses from our bodies. And the goal is to really sort of have a better understanding of emotional states of the users. When I talk about emotion, perhaps it makes sense to consider emotion not just as something that it just limits to human, but other species. A lot of other animals, such as mice, cats, and dogs, they bristle their fur as the act of intimidation or when they're really excited. I'm really interested to see how our wearables could act as a second skin. It can respond in a similar fashion to its surrounding environment. So this soft robotic wearable dress, it responds to the emotional states of the people around with different type of behaviors. So the intention, this was one of the very first work that I started doing in the world of affective computing to see how we can have a garment that responds to affective aspects of the surrounding environments. Within the same line of thinking, I was approached by Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago to and get a commission to produce this piece that is still in the display. So if you're in Chicago, you can see it in the museum. This piece was inspired by hummingbirds' feather. Hummingbirds are amazing creatures. They change the color of their feather from dark green to magenta with the twist of their head. So the technical challenge for me was how to produce a piece which not only changed color, but changed shape. So me and my team, we decided to take this challenge and actually produce a series of actuators in-house ourselves. So these actuators are basically electromagnetic actuators that they twist and flip from one side to another using electromagnetic energy. And then as they're flipping from one side to another, the color of these elements can change independently. So this color is equipped with 250 actuators that we decided to build in-house because we wanted to make sure that we can provide the museum with enough extra actuation system that if something goes wrong, they can easily take out the module and then replace it with a new module. So the process for production of this piece was extremely labor-intensive, and the decision of making these actuators in-house, first it sounded very easy, but in practice it was a lot of iteration and back-and-forth process to make sure that the actuator can actually lift up this material, that they can actually change the angle correctly based on the weight of the attached material was extremely challenging task. So I found myself doing a job of mechanical engineer and my mechanical engineer collaborator producing electrical driver boards. One thing that I have to say, this piece, we were very excited for the fact that all aspects of this piece was custom made, from mechanical to electrical to software, to all components of it was really custom made. As you can see me for days, there was a lot of soldering. There was 250 actuators, 40 driver boards, 1 camera, 4 microcontrollers, all embedded inside this piece. And yet everything basically was inside, hidden inside this piece to make sure everything is completely wearable. And maybe Neil mentioned something in my introduction that I would like to a little pick up here, because when I moved to US, I really didn't know that as a woman I can do this type of thing. Even holding a drill in my hand would considered as a male-dominant activity in my home country. So for me, finding myself doing all this work in the last few years, it's been extremely exciting, and I found my true self through doing this type of work. Thank you. So you see the piece has a very small camera that can recognize people's location as well as their facial expressions. And as people are moving around the piece and expressing different emotion, if the person is blind or her eyes are closed, she can just hear different type of emotions and where people are standing just through hearing her garment. So here is really the idea is that our wearable could expand our sensory experience of the world, even with the eyes closed. the last few years, the debate around the gaze and surveillance from cognitive and neuroscience perspective, as well as critical feminist perspective, has been really fascinating to me. In my work, by implementing various computer vision, I really hope to examine how different strategies of the gaze could be seen as a way of undermining the power structure, or promote a form of, or see the gaze as a form of resistance strategy. So I hope to unpack that for the rest of my presentation. Our gaze is really fascinating because it shows that the sort of our preference, how we give attention to the world around ourselves. We basically look at a specific location when we speak, or we look at a specific location when we walk. So basically, our gaze is biased. Our gaze shows the object of preference and display how we give attention to the world around ourselves. And without going too much through details, this work the series of works that I'm going to show around the theme of gaze and surveillance is also grounded in the work of feminist film theorist Laura Mulvey, as well as John Berger's ways of seeing, and obviously Michel Foucault's French philosopher notion of panopticon. So without going through the details, I just want to mention that the work is really grounded on those theoretical concepts. The question for me was what if women were to understand if they're being watched? So this piece is actually a 3D printed cave that it's equipped with a facial tracking camera that is hidden underneath the 3D printed piece, and it responds to onlooker's gaze. So the facial tracking camera, it basically can detect age, gender, and the gaze of the onlookers, and based on where the onlooker is looking, the garment moves accordingly. I mean, although we know that gender is not representational, and this is problematic, especially in facial tracking AI systems, I think yet the movement of the garment based on where the onlooker is looking, it can unfold very interesting concept about social interaction. So basically, if you're the wearer, you know which part of your body is being looked at because you feel the haptic pressure on your body. And if you're the onlooker, you know that your action is being notified. So this really would change the social interaction. I want to say that this piece was as a part of Artist in Residency at Autodesk in Pier 9, and I had a lot of amazing collaborators and people that have helped and support this system. It was this amazing space that I met individuals such as Madeline, dear friends of mine, and many amazing individuals. So just want to mention that here. Another piece in the same sort of theme of thinking about the notion of gaze was this piece called Can the Subaltern Speak? This project is inspired, the project that I'm going to show is inspired by these historical masks worn by Bandari women from southern part of Iran. It's been said that these masks were developed during the Portuguese colonial rule as a way of protecting the women from the gaze of a slave master looking for attractive women. So from these Iranian historical masks, claiming that they protect the women from the patriarchal oppressor, to Mask of Northwest Coast Indians, to Mask that worn as a political statement. Mask can take on different religion, different social and political roles. And it's really kind of can work as a way for revealing or hiding people's identity. So one thing I was really fascinated when I was looking at these masks. I mean, obviously they're very, at this point, ornamental, it's full of colors. But I was wondering how these women express their emotions. If their face is covered with the eye, how the eyes could be used as a communication. There I came across this interesting incident where an American officer blinked the word torture using his eye blinking using Morse code, saying the word torture.
Well, I don't know what is happening, but whatever the position of my government is, I support it fully. Whatever the position of my government is, I believe in it. I'm a member of that government.
I mean, obviously, the use of the code is nothing new. In fact, during this lockdown, we see that women has been using various type of signal words for reporting against the domestic abuse or domestic violence. And then there was another layer in this project that I was also very inspired by the recent experiments involving 2 AI bots at the Facebook AI Lab, where the intention was to monitor how 2 bots can develop a sort of negotiation act between one another for basically doing a deal between one another. But during these experiments, the bots start to deviate from the plan, and they start developing sort of repeating words and repeating words and creating a language that it made no sense to human. It made the scientists to stop the algorithm, to intervene with this and make sure that this is not happening. I mean, the story is fascinating because it reveals also that knowledge is power, and inability to understand would unnerve those who wish to maintain their authority. So with all these 3 layers, I decided to create a robotic mask that it was trained based on the seminal article by feminist theorist Gayatri Spivak, Can the Subaltern Speak? She asked whether it might be possible for the colonized or the subaltern to have a voice in the face of colonial oppression. So we used machine learning algorithm using Markov chain in order to generate a text. In this system, we represent each word or letter as a state, and the transition as a likelihood that specific words or letter can go after one another. So in the video documentation that you will see, you see 2 women wearing these masks, sending and receiving secret messages between one another. So it uses a BLE protocol for basically sending and receiving these text messages. The overall aim of this project was to sort of explore how gays could be used as a resistance strategy to solve anxiety between this patriarchal system and to develop or aim to develop a language that no one else can understand except these women. 2020, Black Lives Matter protester Samantha Francine stares down a racist Trump supporter. This really prompted me to think about ways that women could stand up using the power of their gaze in this case. So I was approached by a fashion house to produce an installation for a runway show for a Milan Fashion Week last year. And this was an incredible opportunity to think about ways that we can subvert fashion is a very interesting medium for production of culture, but yet we know that fashion is very complicit within the tradition of female objectification and sexual harassment. So for me, this was an incredible opportunity to really see how we can subvert this. How can we produce an installation in the fashion runway show for really questioning the question of female objectification, and especially also a form of internalized male gaze, which also exists within the fashion industry or within our culture. Because many times women have absorbed this condition unconsciously as a form of internalized male gaze. So with this prompt, I decided to produce an installation for this runway show where it was commissioned by Anna Kiki, where in the center there is a model wearing a custom-made helmet where her eyes are captured and streamed to 4 monitors that they're mounted on 4 industrial robotic arms on the stage. So the models are basically, the model's gaze is streamed to these 4 industrial robotic arms staring back at the audience and making them more aware of sort of disturbing biases rooted within our gaze, within the ways that we actually look at each other. So make them to feel watched or feel observed and make them feel a little uncanny by that. So I kind of, as you kind of guess, I like having a little process video also on the background, and then I can talk a little more about the project. So this project was very fast-paced. It was about 6 weeks from the time we talked to get the commissions, contract, set up all the robots, basically have the robots from having a call with Madeline and having 4 robots, arrange the robots to come from Denmark to Milan and then show up in the location and then install everything. So it was extremely fast-paced project. And from technical perspective, we decided to, there was the aspects of producing the helmet, that is basically have 2 small cameras that can capture the eye. On the other hand, we decided to produce the movement of the robot using a VR headset's hands movements as a way that we can produce the tool paths for the robots to go through sort of organic movements. We wanted to create a series of animations for these robots that create different type of sort of anthropomorphic behaviors, like curious, or sometimes staring down, or sometimes sleeping, or sometimes dreaming. And by putting the eye on these robots, we could really create that sort of anthropomorphic feeling that these robots become literally extended version of the artist or the model in this case on the stage. the notion of extended mind has been really, by Andy Clark, has been really fascinating for me. But in this case, I was very interested to see how we can use technology of robotics as an extended version of physical self, physical body on the stage. And one of my favorite moments was this moment where the runway show is really fascinating. During the Milan Fashion Week, people have to move from one show to another. But there was this moment where all the people were coming to photograph the piece, and they were observed. The observer were observed in a way. So that was a really fascinating moment to watch. And how could I talk about the male gaze or internalized male gaze and not talk about Iran? As we see the repression of women's identity as a form of patriarchal dominance over women, which has led to widespread protest last year about women life freedom. And I came across this really tragic stories of protesters from Iran who got permanently blinded as they got shot in the eye by the military forces using rubber bullets from very close range. And soon I realized that these stories keep happening all around the world. It happens in India, in Hong Kong, in Chile, US, after George Floyd's, and also in Iran, obviously. And despite the fact that a lot of these protesters were often peaceful, their non-violent means of expressing political objection have been perceived as violence or riot by authorities. So I decided to make an immersive art installation which uses the victim's gaze to address this very important issue. And unfortunately, this video is not running, but it's basically showing how it was the process of capturing people's eyes close up, and in the video, in the immersive installation, you will see that there is like a black tears that is coming down, and there is the words of the victims that I found online, that it shows up in their eyes. So it tells the story and create awareness around this very important topic.
And that way.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that slide in a second. But to sort of wrap up, as an Iranian-American interdisciplinary designer, I'm really excited about how the world of computation really is not to just merely answer questions, but to ask provocative questions, to challenge dominant outlooks, to see how we can use technology for not producing forms that they're beautiful and shiny, but to address larger, critical, social, political issues of our times. So I'm really excited to see how the world of critical computation could help us to see the world differently, and my hope is really to see the more peaceful future for all of us. And maybe I'm going to finish with this slide saying that I'm very, very excited that our new book, Interactive Design, just came out. So this is the book. You can order it online. Our previous book that we co-edited with Neil, 3D Printed Body Architecture, was in 2017, which was really about a question of how many architects in the fields are actually working in a variety of scales. That is not just architecture, but it also applies to different scale of architecture, which is related to body. Either object size scale or variables. But our new book, Interactive Design, is really looking at interactive design and design of responsive environments from cybernetics and the work of Gordon Pask, and to many incredible individuals and practitioners that they're applying the word of interactive design to wearables, to architecture, to urban scale projects. So if you're interested, come check out the book. It has a lot of interesting materials. And with that, I'm looking forward to your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I want to just maybe ask Behnaz, how would you understand the notion of architecture in the context of design? What is your definition of architecture?
Just a simple question. Well, I know that for many people, architecture means building construction or creating buildings. And I respect that, I understand that. For me, personally, I see architecture as design sensibility that could be applied in many different scales. I think architectural education is fascinating because it can open up so many possibilities. What is really fascinating is that architecture students, they're not just working in architecture firms after graduation. We see that architecture students are working in a space industry or in apparel industry. Right now, like many companies like Adidas and Nike, they just need computational designers. And most of the people that they hire, they come from architecture education. So I think the tech industry are hiring a lot of architecture students, again, because they need someone who has a sense of design, but also computationally advanced, basically. So I think I see all of that as a form of architecture. I see architecture as a design sensibility that can be applied in so many different fields.
I mean, I think that Paolo Antonelli, in our book, Paolo Antonelli is the curator at MoMA of Architecture and Design, and she sees architecture as being just part of a spectrum, broader spectrum of design. It's interesting to see what is coming out of that. And certainly, Akim Menges was telling me the other day that out of ICT Stuttgart, only 5% actually go into architecture. They're all working for the for BMW, Mercedes, and so on, or indeed for Adidas and Puma in Germany. So I'd like to invite some questions. Maddie, do you want to ask a question? Maybe.
Sure. I have a quick question, because not only are you a brilliant designer, but you're also an architectural educator. And what advice would you have for architectural education institutions at universities? What advice would you have to prepare students for this expanded definition of what architecture can be and the influence that we could have in shaping culture?
I mean, thank you, Maddie. Like, I think the advice would be awareness, increase awareness. I mean, we have to know and acknowledge that this is, the field is changing. The discipline, the profession of architecture is also changing. I mean, with advances of AI, we're just going to see that everything is going to move and shuffle around. So the fact that, architecture education is not just conventional, core architecture courses, but also we can actually open up students to learn about the world of, or the physical computing, the world of robotics, the words that in the first place, it doesn't seem like an answer to building buildings or construction, but actually the field is growing. So we have to just open ourselves up to those fields, and we have to be able to educate our students, because they go out, and if they don't know these things, the job competition is going to be higher. So the ones that they will be hired easily are the ones that they know more technological tools, either coding, robotics, again physical computing, sensors, anything that attracts you. I think, and students, they have to be able to learn those knowledge during their education.
I think that's great too for public universities, right? Like, not only can you more easily hire,
Absolutely. Thanks for the question.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much. I have to say that I'm truly blown away by these designs. It's incredible. I wanted to actually ask you, or a comment, because these designs are expressing, your emotions, what you're feeling, and I think this is super valuable because there's a lot of people that cannot express this, as you mentioned. They are hiding. But again, it's also a double sword, right? Because you're expressing what you're saying, but then there's a lack of what is privacy. And for these designs, I think they should be used widely because then there's like the psychological effect. If you see someone that is upset, maybe you can do something about it because you see how the texture is changing and everything. But then again, we're seeing this with social media where we see how people are expressing like almost 24/7 how they're feeling with the reels and all these things. And again, there's that lack of privacy. So how do you see this movement going forward? Would you like people to actually start using this as regular casual clothes? But how would this impact society also?
Thank you very much for your question. Your question has many aspects, so I'm going to try to see how I can address some of it. I think the question of privacy and transparency of data, either is physiological and then expressing that to outside world is fascinating, right? Sometimes we don't want to show that. So I agree with you, and I think I cannot make a blanket statement that what needs to be exactly, because I think it's the question of in which context and how it's been used, rather than do I think that everyone should wear this, or is this going to answer all the world's problems? No. But I think in a specific context, it's very interesting to think about how, for instance, people with autism, they might look at you, they might realize that you are expressing certain emotion in your face, but they're not able to recognize sadness from happiness, from anger, And if their garments is able to produce, reactions that gradually they can learn that. They can also learn that, this emotion associated with this behavior. So in certain contexts, yes, it can really be helpful. In certain contexts, no. I have to also say that in my work, my intention was not ever to mass produce items. I've never been interested in business side of things and producing items that I can mass produce to have it in everyone's hands, basically. Or everyone's body. That wasn't my intention. A lot of my projects are become a vehicle for reflections or creating ways for sparking conversations. And I think as a designer, I'm really interested in that space, how we create conversation. When Caress of the Gaze was published, it got really viral. It's got out of our hand. It was got all over media and many newspapers publish about it. I was getting emails from all around the world. Some people love it, some people hate it, and some people were asking me where can they buy it. And obviously this wasn't a thing about purchasing this product. But what was fascinating for me as a designer was the conversation around it. Just looking at people's comments and creating conversation about, question of male gaze on the female body. Obviously something that it has a history behind it, but then bringing new technology to address this in an interesting way was creating and sparking conversation. So I'm really interested in those type of conversation. And question that you're asking in a similar way, it just create that conversation about the question of privacy and transparency. And I think it's an important conversation to have. Thank you.
We've got time for... Is there
one more?
Ben, do you want Babylon? Do you want to ask one? Okay, two more questions then, okay. No, Babylon, come on. I should say that Babylon's is on the Doctor of Design program, and I just mentioned the fact that up on here, on the right-hand side, is the work of Philip Beasley, and Matt Gorbett is also on the Doctor of Design program, was the computational expert behind making that work. Babylon.
I have a long question, but I'll try to keep it short. Behnaz, thank you so much one is for a little bit of an optimistic view towards this flux of technology that we are all around in. And I think my question is more towards your process of working also, especially in this changing technologies, and then today is this robot, tomorrow it's another one, and then the tool that it comes with. So my first question is that how do you navigate and have a single thread in your work which helps you to keep on moving forward as things change? And of course, there are certain questions that bind your work as well. The second question, if you could really advise everyone on what your process of documentation has helped you through in even reflecting on the work that is finished, but moving forward towards your new work as well. So how has documentation, including writing and navigating this world of editorial processes as well?
Thank you. I forgot your first question. I'm so sorry.
My first question was related to your process of working, and if you could reflect further on the process of documentation, especially when you're working with so many technologies and coming from an architecture background, being in a school of cinema. So how has the process been?
So maybe this might be interesting for all the students who are studying architecture, because when I did my master in architecture, I started learning a lot of physical computing online, just like watching YouTube videos, learning about the world of Arduino and microcontrollers and coding and processing, and a little later in P5.js. So it all started kind of like learning these things on my own, and also toasted a bunch of Arduino boards, making mistakes, and learned through, doing. There was a lot of process, and a lot of my early work was really about tinkering through making, through the process of, prototyping and building things, working with various tools and technologies to tinker some ideas. My practice in the last few years has changed, because a lot of time the ideas are informing my work, meaning that I have this, let's say, critical idea, then I go like what technology I can use to express that. But early on in my practice, it was more of like what tools I have available and what kind of idea I can produce. So there was slightly a shift in my process that I would say that has happened in the last 5 years. And to a question of documentation, I want to encourage all students document as much as possible. A lot of time when you're building something, time-lapse yourself. You would be surprised when you're looking at these videos how much you learn through your videos, watching yourself. Because sometimes you're prototyping some things, and at the time you're like, oh, this is absolute failure, and then you move on, and you forget about it. And then 1 month after, you're looking at your video, you're like, oh, that prototype was actually more promising. So when you're documenting everything, you have the opportunity to go back in time and actually evaluate a lot of things that you produce. Like we as architecture students, me a little back, it was also like a lot of things we make, and a lot of them are fascinating, but we just forget about them. So try to capture that as much as possible. That would be one big advice that I would give to all of you. Capture everything without judgment, and just record it. Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Okay, in front of you.
What interested me a lot about some of the work that you do is that not only is it reflective of a person's specific self-emotion, but also that of the observer. And so it seems like there are moments where that might even blend over, like with the iridescent project, that it seemed in some moments, maybe I'm getting it wrong, but it seemed in some moments like it was reacting to the onlooker as well. And so how do you think about the dynamic of how it responds in that way? And is there like a system of how maybe it responds in a specific way to specific emotions, or does it express each individual person's emotion in a different way? Like, is there a set language, or is it completely free?
Yeah, good question. I think the question of emotion is really challenging one. I'm actually currently working on my monograph, Emotive Design, which really look at also the work of affective computing. But there is a lot of also criticism to this sort of universal emotion which is, can we really not consider cultural, social aspects of emotion? Can we say everyone is happy, and if they're smiling, they're really happy in every culture? So there's those questions that I think it's still in the world of computation is very simplified. So I love to think about it further and think about ways where we can really get engaged with those, cultural, social aspects of emotion detection as well. My work at the moment, it doesn't do that, but I feel like I'm really interested to explore that further. And the other aspects of your question where you're asking about, there is this internal physiological response from the users, and there is external world, which is the social interaction. A lot of my work, either they answer internal or answer the external. None of the work has been merging the two, but ultimately what I am interested is to really see that they address both internal as well as external stimuli.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
Just to say, you can follow Behnaz on Instagram. There's only one Behnaz, it seems, so it's quite straightforward. And, I think that we've had some really amazing people here over the last few years. Refik Anadol was here before COVID. Now he's a rock star. Just watch Behnaz's career as it develops. But I think above all, I want to say is to everyone here who comes from a different country, whose first language is not English, who is female, who hasn't engaged with technology before, Behnaz is an incredible role model for you and show you what you can do to reinvent yourself and take that initiative. So let's see who are going to be the next Behnaz Farais around here. So thank you very much, Behnaz. Thank you. Fantastic lecture.